Do you want to play better golf? Of course you do. Well, here are 3 easy ways to do it. 1. Open your smartphone and look for the podcast app. 2. Open the podcast app and search Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan. 3. Subscribe and never miss an episode of great golf instructor interviews from around the world. A new guest every week, like David Ledbetter, Brian Manzella, Dr. Sashal McKenzie, James Siekman, just to name a few. Hear their insight as they deliver their wisdom of the game. Take control of your game. Subscribe today. Your game will thank you for it.
Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf podcast that interviews the best and brightest minds in the golf industry. Now, here's your host, Bernard Sheridan.
So, Monte, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, the first question we always like to ask all of our guests is, when is the very first time you can remember picking up a golf club?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I remember as a small boy, I didn't take up golf seriously until I was a teenager, but I remember my dad taking me to the driving range when I was probably 7, 8 years old.
And then, you basically went to the driving range a lot after that, or a little bit, or just like whenever Dad said, "Hey, let's go to the range. I want to hit some balls." Or
yeah, it was not very often. Maybe once a month, once every 2 months, like you said.
Yeah.
My dad said, "Hey, you want to go to the range?" I say, "Sure." I didn't get that interested in golf until maybe 14 or 15.
Did you play a lot of other sports when you were young?
Yeah, my dad was a Major League Baseball player for 10 years, so that was what I had the most interest in. And I played other sports too: soccer, basketball, football, pretty much everything. And golf was a late interest. After I had a really severe elbow injury when I was 15, and that's what really got me into golf.
So then, when was the time that the aha moment came to you that you said, "Hey, you know what? Maybe I can do this as a profession"?
Probably my last year of college. I had no aspirations to be a professional golfer when I was a junior or while I was in college. And all of a sudden, when I got to be around 22, 23 years old, I started to really play a lot better, and decided to make that as a profession.
So how much involved are you in the game now as a profession, and what is actually your capacity in that? What do you do the most of?
I've been an instructor for about 6 or 7 years now. I travel around the world doing golf schools, mostly across the country, but I'll actually be doing one in London next month, and there's a schedule to try and get one done in Australia and in Hong Kong. And I just turned 50, so I have some aspirations for the Champions Tour. Made the finals of the Q School just this last fall, and then just before the finals, a few days before the finals, blew my knee out and had to have a knee surgery that had me out for about 6 months. So I'm just getting back into it now.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about, because I'm sure there's a lot of our listeners who would love to know, really, what goes into preparing to do something like that? I mean, I know that you got injured, but what led up to you in preparing to say, "Hey, you know what? I think I want to try to qualify for the Champions Tour. So I'm going to start to work on it, and so that I can get to where I think I'm going to be able to do that." So what was the process? Because I think that a lot of people, I think they think that the process is just get out there and beat balls as much as you can and play as much as you can and things like that. But I'm sure there's a lot more involved in it than that.
There is a lot more involved. I'll say what I heard the great Jackie Burke say to somebody is golf is played in 5 stages. There's on the practice area, which includes obviously the driving range, the chipping area, the putting green. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is on the golf course. Stage 3 is during a tournament. Stage 4 is late in a tournament, and stage 5 is late in a major tournament. So, I think most professionals the Q school has been called the 5th major at every level. So that's a pretty major event. So you have to go through all of those stages. So, you go through the beating ball stage, then you try and translate it to the course. Then you have to go play in tournaments to test yourself, and so on. And, getting to that 5th stage is not many people are able to achieve that.
Is there anything that you do other than what we just talked about to prepare you for those type of things, physically and mentally?
There is. And, mental preparation is obviously a huge deal, which I actually did very well leading up to last year. But I think one of the major issues that I neglected last year, which now that I'm getting healthy again, I need to put more effort into is, the physical aspect. That's why you see a lot of today's golfers getting in better physical shape, because the game is so trying mentally, it wears on you physically. So you have to be strong physically so you can stand up to the mental, anguish that you suffer.
Sure, and I would think that if you're in better physical condition, that it's easier to stay in the moment than it is not to, because you don't have to worry about I know that if, let's say your back is beginning to hurt or you're feeling tired, then that attention that you're paying to what you're doing, that level kind of starts to fall off. And you're unable to stay in it mentally as well.
Yep.
When your body is starting to go. So, and I think that's a big reason why we see players, not only today, preparing more physically, but also when they're out there playing. And we don't see it on TV. We see it occasionally, but they're also fortifying themselves on the golf course. They're eating a banana, or they're having nuts, or they're doing things that are not going to bog them down physically, but are going to keep that energy level flowing so that they can stay in it mentally throughout the entire round. I mean, and I think that that's got to be two of the most difficult parts. And then putting themselves under that pressure and being able to perform under pressure. What are some of the things that you do other than entering events and putting yourself in real world pressure? Because there's a lot of players out there who don't have that opportunity at a lower level, at an amateur level, to get in a lot of events. They might not be able to shoot low enough scores to get into those events, or they might not be able to have the time to travel to those events and things like that. So what can they do to kind of like simulate that pressure? Is there anything that can be done to do that?
Oh, there are a lot of things that you can do. One of the games that I have a lot of my students play is whatever you're working on, be it putting, chipping, hitting 5-irons, drivers, whatever. I tell them, as soon as you start to get a little bit fatigued mentally, which often goes along with fatigue physically, but as soon as you're like, okay, I've had enough practice, I don't want to be here anymore, I'm tired, that's when you put yourself to the test and you say, okay, I'm not going to leave the range until I hit 5 consecutive wedges within X distance on a target, or until I make 10 5-footers in a row, or whatever. You have to be you have to be realistic with these things and not give yourself an insurmountable task. You come up with the task that under normal circumstances you can perform, And now when you're a little bit fatigued mentally and you're ready to go home and ready to call it a day, you put that pressure on yourself where, if I don't make these 10 5-footers in a row, you're like, I want to get out of here. And there's a lot of pressure when you're on that 8th and 9th putt that if I don't make these, I got to start all over again. Sometimes that internal pressure can be even worse than the external pressure of a big golf tournament or a money game or whatever.
Well, I know that I believe personally that all pressure is internal, and that it's how you handle the situation that you're under internally that'll allow you to rise above. And a great example is what we saw yesterday with Spieth and DJ, and how DJ he pulled it out. He was under pressure. I mean, he had a bad tee shot on 18, and he had to pitch out to a shorter distance. He couldn't go for the green, and he didn't let that pressure get to him. And then when he had that long putt, he curled it into the right side of that cup and dropped it. And then it kind of put the pressure. Now it was changed up, and everybody, I think, still felt that the pressure was still on DJ when they went to the playoff, back to the 18th tee, to drive it well in order to make a difference. And of course, Jordan hit an incredible tee shot again, and then DJ just stomped on it and hit it to within a 3/4 wedge distance, and knocked it within 2 feet of the hole. So there's where it's saying that you're under that pressure, and not that Jordan didn't play well under pressure either, because I think that when it comes down to playing under pressure right now in modern day, he's the best guy. I mean, that putt that he had on 17 to make par, that was pressure. I mean, and he dropped it. So are there a lot of times where you have students also say put themselves in that situation where they really have to drop long putts and maybe from different distances, or not from the same spot, but let's say sink like 3 20-foot putts from different distances to put pressure on themselves that way? I mean, that's really where it comes down to winning tournaments, when you really come down to it.
Yeah, I agree 100% with your original comment. Yeah, excuse me, it's all internal pressure. And what the key is not internalizing it too much. Not allowing the external factors to get to you and internalize too much. That's what Tiger was so great at. To me, a lot of Tiger's physical skills, while great, were overrated. I think what was underrated about him was his ability to be in the moment, to not internalize the pressure too much, to focus on individual shots. To me, and the reason why I bring that up is I think that's where most amateurs fail. Tiger, I watched him do this. I watched Tiger snap hook his first 4 tee shots of the day, come to the 5th hole, OB left, set up down the left-hand side, and cut it into the middle of the fairway. He was able to hit this quote-unquote one shot at a time, not let the pass get to him. Amateur golfers actually, it's not just amateur golf. If you show how golfers on skill levels, from the worst beginner all the way up to the 2 guys you were mentioning, Spieth and Johnson, it's almost a one-on-one correlation between those guys, at those levels, and the ability to individualize one single shot and hit it as well as you can. That's why your comment about, well, I'm going to hit these putts from different spots, these 20-footers, that's all excellent stuff. You need to learn to stand up on every single shot, whether it's your first tee shot of the day or whether it's a 5-footer for a triple bogey, and just hit that one shot as well as you can. To me, that is the least practiced and the least acute skill in golf, is understanding the importance of this shot that you have at hand.
I totally agree, and I have many of my students try to do random practice as opposed to block practice, because in block practice, let's say they're hitting putts from 10 feet from the same spot over and over and over and over and over again, believing in their mind that they are perfecting their putting stroke and shot from 10 feet. Now, I believe that what they're doing is they're fine-tuning a skill better, but they are not perfecting 10-foot putts. So if they take that 10-foot putt and move it around the green, the practice green, to different holes, to different spots, still from the same distance, now what they're doing is they're randomly hitting different putts, even though they're the same distance, through different breaks, through different situations, and how many of those can they sink in a row, as opposed to the same putt over and over and over again. I used to have a guy who, I owned an indoor facility up in Pennsylvania, and this gentleman would come to my facility, and I had a 20-yard pitching and chipping green, and he would take a wedge, and he would literally hit 500 balls a day from the same exact spot with the same wedge, literally wearing a hole in like I had to replace the gravel underneath the turf, because I would say to him, you need to be hitting from different spots here, dude. You're not going to get any better. Yes, I am. I'm fine-tuning something. I'm working on something. Well, when he would go out and play, and I knew this guy, and this guy came to my place for 5 years, almost every single day, because he worked the B shift. So he would come in Monday through Friday when we opened, and he would be there till like noon, and then he would go home and eat, and then go to work at like 2 o'clock or whatever, and work until 12 at night. And those 5 years that I knew him doing that, he did not lower his handicap at all. Not one bit. And I think that if he would have, and he would do the same thing, after he left there, I closed my place. He went to a driving range at a public facility, and I'd see him out there hitting wedge shots to like 100 yards, like for hours on end. Same shot, same club, same everything, and I'm like, you're not going to be able to change. You ingrained your stroke. It's in there. You can't change that. Now you got to start picking different distances, for God's sakes. Is every shot that you have into the green 100 yards? Every single one? It can't be. It's impossible.
Yeah, I agree. I really, really instill in all my students, change clubs frequently, aim to different targets on the driving range when they go hit balls. Don't hit more than maybe 10 or 15 from the same spot to the same spot. Move around the chipping green, move around the putting green. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll say to mine, if you want to do that, I'm okay with that if you do that for the first 50 balls. You got 100 balls? The first 50, go ahead. Work on that one shot or whatever. Now, take the other 50 and go work on other things. Go to the short game area, and don't just make your practice time just on the range with, let's say, a wedge, a 7-iron, and a driver. Because unless you're playing with just a wedge, a 7-iron, and a driver, you're playing your rounds that way, you're not doing your game any good. You got to hit every club in your bag, because it's going to happen. You may not hit every club in your bag during most rounds. I know that DJ doesn't. We don't see DJ hitting a lot of 4-irons, because he doesn't have to. But right. Point being is, still, I'm sure that he practices 4-iron shots.
Sure.
I know he does. And so things like that, are definitely important for players to get the max out of their game. That's for sure. And so, and that I'm sure is something that when you're preparing for events or for tournaments or whatever, that's part of the process.
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite things to do, and a lot of people actually frown on this because people have been given in their mindsets, when you're on the golf course, you're supposed to score. That's the main thing. Well, yeah, that's very, very important. But I tell a lot of people, look, practicing on the golf course is a very, very good thing. So when I'm preparing for a tournament, I'll go out and I go out late in the day when there's no one on the golf course, and I'll hit a drive, and then I'll go out to where my drive is and go to, 4 or 5 different spots in slightly different yardages, slightly different ball above my feet, ball below my feet. One's 68 yards, one's 75 yards, and just, hit different shots from different spots and yardages. And that's how you learn. I think one of the big misconceptions, semantics can be very important in improving at golf. And I think the thing that is really big in the discussion that we're having here is the term muscle memory that a lot of people like to throw around.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exist. Your muscles don't remember repetitive motion. It's a neural pathway in the brain.
That's right.
And if you just go out there and mindlessly beat balls, you're not building that new neural pathway in your brain because your muscles don't remember repetitive motion. And I think, a lot of people will listen to this and say, okay, Monte, that's kind of the same thing. Well, it's not. And learning a skill, and I tell all my students, learning a skill in golf is the exact same process as a baby learning to walk. And quite often, the baby learns just as much from falling down as it does from the 3 steps that it makes. So you need to give your brain time and exercise, so to speak, in order to build these skills.
Well, I think the reason why people do that is because they're taught. A lot of people who teach golf only work on mechanical type things. They don't work on because once the mechanical thing is in there, it's in there. It's not going away. It's not like you're going to lose it or I lost my swing or anything like that. I mean, really what's happening is you're losing the ability to access that swing in your brain because maybe, parts of your brain is overthinking it and now it can't access.
Right. I agree 100%. I just had, I talked about my knee surgery before. I just had a lesson in that, essentially learning how to walk again after limping around for 6 months. And, walking straight is one thing, walking on a hill is something else. I've had to reacquire the learning skills of walking. So, I use that as an analogy for my students, and they've picked up on it pretty well.
Well, I really like what you said about the course, and I think that more players, instead of playing rounds of golf all the time, could maybe to their benefit in the early evening, when there's hardly anybody out there, go out there and drop balls at random spots.
Yep.
And hit shots into holes. If you watch a PGA Tour professional or an LPGA professional play a practice round, and I've seen many, that's what they do. They don't just go out there and play a round of golf. I mean, they're especially when they get on the putting green, they're not putting to the cup. A lot of them will take a tee and put a ball on a tee and put it in the positions where they believe are the pin positions that are going to happen, and then they will hit balls in from that position, or they will actually putt from spots to that pin position from all different spots on the green, and if they hit that tee and the ball knocks off, they know it went in the hole. And I mean, I watched them do that I saw a lot of guys doing that at the Masters during practice rounds on the 11th green. They didn't do as much on the 12th, but on the 11th I saw a lot of guys doing that, and things like that. Really, I mean, it's that's the way to get better at what you're doing, or prepare for an event that you're going to play on a course, to really know that course, to know the nuances, the subtleties of it. And I think most amateur players, or I don't want to say just amateur players, but recreational players, they don't do that. They
No.
just kind of go play around and see how they do, and that's it.
Absolutely. You know, I spent a few years playing on the Nike Tour, which has now become the Web.com Tour.
Sure.
And I have my PGA Tour instructor credentials, so I followed dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of rounds on the PGA Tour. And I'd say in a given week, maybe 5 or 10% of the guys are playing a round of golf, and those are the guys playing the big money games that you hear about through the media. But 95% of the guys are doing exactly what you described. Hitting different clubs off the tee to see which one gives them the best placement to play the rest of the hole. Everybody, like you said, they find where the dots are, the paint dots are, or, you know, obviously many of them have their yardage books from the previous year, so they know where all 4 pin positions were the previous year. They don't care what they shoot on Monday or Tuesday or even Wednesday during the Pro-Am. They want to know how their game is working, what the course is going to give them, how they need to do that. And quite honestly, I'd say maybe 1 out of 20 amateur golfers actually do things like that. All of them have been, I hate to use the word brainwashed, but all of them have been brainwashed into thinking every time you go out there, you have to grind for a score, you have to grind for a number, you know, grind out those 2-foot putts, because that's how you're going to build yourself under pressure. And that's just not the case of what high-level players do.
Yeah, I think you're actually being kind of generous in that 1 to 20. I think it's more like 1 in 1,000 who do it. Really.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's because I know that when I was playing and trying to do, you know, in events, and I would play practice rounds, I would do what we do. I would not just go out and play a round of golf and see how I played and see what I scored or whatever. I would drop balls all over the place, and I would most of the stuff that I played in, and I didn't play in a lot because I was more of an instructor than a playing pro. Most of the pin positions weren't really in crazy spots. I mean, they were pretty close to the center of the green, or you know, in a position that was either front or back, but not like in these crazy tucked positions that, you know, that these guys deal with on a regular basis, especially on Sunday. I mean, they're always dealing with that kind of stuff, and I'm sure it's even crazier in Q school what they have to go through, because they really want to try to, I guess, get the cream to rise to the top.
Absolutely. There was some, you know, even though I injured my knee, I went down there, took a bunch of anti-inflammatories and pain pills and gave it a shot anyway. It wasn't very good. But yeah, some of the pin positions, I played with Paul McGinley, who, you know, he was a Ryder Cupper, captained the Ryder Cup team once. And during one of the rounds, you know, we were kind of scratching our heads for a couple of the pin positions going, yeah, well, that's a tough pin.
Yeah, it's like 4 paces off the back corner of the...
Oh, no, we had some threes.
Yeah, 3 paces?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there was one in particular that it was literally 1 pace from the false front. So if you hit it short,
you're done.
You know, it was going to roll down to the false front. And if you hit it past the pin and rolled your putt more than 6 inches by the hole, it was going to roll off the green.
Right.
So yeah, there are always a lot of those. That's why when you hear people say, you know, oh, well, you know, I played Torrey Pines. That's, you know, they have that's where we have our closest tour event to where I live. And, you know, it's a hard course, but I don't think it's as hard as the scores I saw in the U.S. Open and in the, the Farmers. And I go, well, what pin positions did you play? Oh, well, that doesn't make that much of a difference. I go, that's all of the difference.
Yeah, and how tight were the greens cut, and
right.
and how deep was the rough, and how long was what tees were you playing from? And I mean, there's a ton of things that go into it, because people believe if they play an event that a U.S. Open was at, even if they play it from the tips, that it's as tough as it would be during U.S. Open situations, which is ridiculous, because they toughen the course up tremendously, and then the mental
sure.
that you're going through because you're in the U.S. Open is insane.
I have a perfect example of what you're describing. I just played Chambers Bay last week, and we played from the 7,800 yard tees, and I shot 69, and I told a couple of friends, and they're like, oh, well, that's amazing. I go, well, the greens were running about 9 on the stimp meter, and only 1 or 2 of the pins were, what you would consider U.S. Open type pins. So even though I played the back tees, the course was probably playing 5 or 6 shots easier than even Thursday and Friday at the U.S. Open.
Right. So which means that if you were doing that in the U.S. Open, you probably would have shot a 75 or 76, which is a huge difference.
Right.
Even though that would be a great score for most players, that would be a great score. But that's the difference, I think, too, that between professionals and because you get these guys who like win their club championship, or and their winning score was like a 69 or something, or a 70. And then their buddies are all going, man, you should try to go out to qualify for this or that or whatever. And then they go out to qualify for something like that, and they shoot a 69, and they miss it by 4 shots, because there's like 3 guys who shot 64s and got in, and you didn't.
Right, absolutely. It's tour golf, and regular golf that we see on a daily basis are two different things. Course conditions. Before we were talking about pins, I could make what people would consider an easy golf course play really, really hard by putting the pins in the right places. And conversely, we could go to some of the hardest courses in America, and I could make them pretty playable just by cutting down all the rough and putting the pins in all the flat spots.
Yep, absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't really take that into consideration, as that it really is. It's a completely different game that those guys and gals play out there than what we're seeing. And the funny thing about it is, a lot of them, they make it look so easy, but also the way that they shoot those things, and what I mean by that is through the television aspect, they're showing you most of the good shots. They're not showing you all the bad shots. They're not showing you the guys who aren't leading. They're showing you only the guys who are leading, and those are the guys who are playing at their best. And these other players are not. If you go to an event, now you can start to see some of the things that happen. And Spieth just proved that too. That first shot with a 6-iron into 18, and where it ended up. I mean, anything can happen, and they make mistakes too. They don't hit these perfect shots every single time, even though a lot of us think they do.
It's funny you say that, because I think the single biggest issue that amateur golfers have is not understanding expectations. And there's too much adjusting. The average amateur golfer uses 40 different golf swings during, I hooked that one, I need to hold the face open longer. I bladed that one, I need to hit down more. And this happens to me, and I get mad at people, and they're like, what did I do? I'll be with like an 8 handicap, who's obviously a very, very good golfer. And we'll be 150 yards, and he'll hit it 30 feet left of the hole and slam his club and go, man, that was terrible. And I go, what are you talking about? That's like 30 feet is not much higher than the tour average from 150 yards. Oh, no. Those guys, they stick their 150-yard shots 6-8 feet or in every single time. And I go, yeah, late on Sunday, but not the guys shooting 76 and missing the cut. So, I'd say about 2 out of every 3 golfers that I give lessons to, their understanding of what their quality of shot should be is way off. And so I make all of them go look at the PGA Tour stats, and I say, look, you're an 8. You're obviously significantly worse than the worst guy on the PGA Tour. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I got no problem with that. So to understand, they go look at, okay, the guy who's 180th in proximity to the hole from 150 yards averages like 35 feet from the hole. So if you hit a 150-yard shot 40 feet from the hole, that's actually, for your skill level, very, very good.
It's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just a general comment that I make, I go, unless you're a scratch golfer or better, if you hit the green, statistically, that's a good shot.
Yep.
And they kind of look at me funny and they go, okay. And they go, well, why is that important? And I go, well, if you hit an 80-yard shot 40 feet and you're like, okay, that wasn't my best, but that's acceptable for my skill level, you'll be less apt to make an adjustment on your next one, and then you'll likely hit it better. So if you can understand what's a good shot for yourself, you'll be adjusting less from shot to shot. Then you'll build a more consistent swing and then get better. So, there's a process to this. There's a method to the madness that if you understand for your skill level what an acceptable shot is in the long run, well, I'm a competitor and I want to be better. No, I understand that. I'm not saying accept bad shots. I'm saying understand better what's an acceptable shot for you. And, the thing that I deal with all day long, as I'm sure you've seen and all instructors do, is you'll see a guy who shows up, oh, I'm chunking all of my shots. And, okay, well, here's why. They have a little fix, and they flush 2 or 3 in a row, and then they hit one thin, and they go, oh, man, that was thin. I go, yeah, and it went right next to the ones you hit solid. So, this sounds like, Monte, you're nitpicking all of us. No, I want you guys to get better. My only goal is that golfers get better. And the more you understand you're allowed to miss hit shots, the more you understand that, if you hit the ball on the green, that's a good shot. The more people start to understand that, the better they get. And it sounds very like I'm lecturing them and I'm talking down to them, and I don't want anybody ever to feel like that. It's just understanding what you're capable of is the most important thing in golf, I think.
Well, I mean, if you make your expectations higher than what your ability level is at the moment, okay, it's in some ways it's good because it gets you to start to raise your ability level to meet your expectations. But there's a fine line between going too far, because now all you're doing is beating yourself up, and that's not mentally good for you either, and that's not going to improve your game at all. That's just going to make it worse. So if you can kind of say, okay, that's not bad, I'm on the green, or whatever, and even if it's thin or fat or whatever, if it ends up in the same spot, well then guess what? On the score, it's on your scorecard, it wouldn't matter if it was a perfect shot to 12 feet or a bladed shot to 12 feet.
Absolutely.
It's still to 12 feet, so what's the difference how it got there? You're not even going to be able to look on the scorecard to know how it got there. As a matter of fact, the only person who's going to know is you. And maybe your playing partners if you ended up really, thinning it and it ran and there was no trouble in the front and it bounced 60 yards up to the green and I would still go to them, hey, I thought that was going to really stink, but I ended up with a break there. So you got to always look at, kind of count the small things, that when they are misses, if they end up in a good spot, to be happy. And there's some that you hit you feel like you hit it perfect and it ends up in a spot that you didn't want it to, too. I mean, that's golf. That's life. That's the way things are, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up so much on it. We should just accept it. That's how we're going to improve. If we beat ourselves up, it's going to take us longer to improve because we're always living in the past. And you can't live in the past. You have to move into the future.
Yeah, I agree. The kind of phrase that I tell everybody, make your long-term goals and expectations as high as you want, but have your expectations on the next shot to be modest. You know, if you want to hit it 300 and hit 14 fairways someday, great. But on this next shot, just try to hit the ball solid in play somewhere. And, you know, have more modest goals in the short term and have as grandiose a long-term goals as you see fit.
Right. I mean, it's just like in baseball. I mean, Ichiro, over 3,000 hits. Every one of them weren't home runs.
Nope.
Okay? I mean, a lot of them were lay down bunts or little bloopers over the second baseman's head, and it was a hit. So, and
right.
That's really all that matters. And when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, you know, we're just going to do the best that we can, and hopefully once that's done, say, okay, maybe next time we can do a little bit better. And if we don't, then that's okay too. We're going to keep trying.
Exactly right. I mean, it sounds like one of these positive thinking seminars, and I always make a joke about it, but
yeah.
Honestly, this is all you can do as a golfer. Hit the shot in front of you the best that you can, and then accept the results and go try to do better on the next one. That's all you can do.
Yeah. And try, and that's it. I mean, and life is like that too. And if you live your life like that, which I try to, and I always didn't. When I was much younger, I didn't. Of course. I mean, we have higher expectation levels when we're younger. As we get older, our expectation levels lower a little bit. We're a little bit more accepting of our failures. We learn better from our failures, I believe.
Absolutely.
And because we understand what we did, and we're also not in a big hurry to fix it. We're a little bit more methodical about what we do and trying to make it better. And right. I think that comes through maturity. But that's definitely the case, is that if you live your life like that and you play your game like that, you're going to have a lot less stress level in your life. You're going to be a lot happier person. And you're going to be able to help a lot of other people too. Because
yep.
of your attitude is a lot more relaxed and not so intense. Not that intense is bad, but sometimes it's really not good for your health to be that intense. You know?
Yeah, it's look, we talked about Tiger before. All that intensity's kind of caught up with him.
Yeah, it's true. So for players who are interested in having the opportunity to work with you or to ask you questions, what is the best way that they can get in touch with you and chase you down to kind of pick your brain or come take a lesson or work with you personally that are in your area?
There's a number of ways. There's my website, MonteScheinblum.com, where you can send me an email. My YouTube channel, which is also Monte Scheinblum or Hit It Long, either of those two. My Instagram at Monte Scheinblum, my Twitter at Monte Scheinblum. Any questions that people have. The YouTube one, I've been a little bit lax at times because there's a lot of trolling and arguments on a lot of my videos there. But I get back my emails within 24 hours and Twitter and Instagram questions almost immediately.
Great. So before we go, give us a little tip on one tip that a player can do to hit it longer.
To hit it longer, yeah.
Because everybody wants to hit it longer, let's face it. I mean, I'm sure that Jordan Spieth wants to hit it longer. Because if he would have hit a 340-yard drive, they might still be in a playoff right now.
It's really, really funny. Being a former long drive champion, that's everybody's. Most of my new students, that's, Monte, teach me how to hit it longer.
And that's really why I didn't make this whole thing about that.
Right.
Because I know that you're a lot deeper than that. I know you are.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And what they're all surprised to hear me say is, let's learn to hit that 7-iron solid. And they kind of look at me funny. We learn how to do that. I go, all right, pull the driver out. Go ahead, give it a rip. And then they're like, wow, that's more club head speed than I normally have. The number one tip that this is universal. There are very few universal things in golf. But if you can learn to swing as fast as you can, not as hard, as fast as you can, and hit the ball in the middle of the club face. Hitting the ball in the middle of the club face is the number one issue. You know, someone swinging at 100, hitting it in the middle, 100 miles an hour, hitting it in the middle is going to hit it way farther than someone who hits it 105 or 106 miles an hour and doesn't hit it in the middle. So when you're out practicing, golf is a trial and error process, whether you have an instructor or not. You know, the old dig it out of the dirt thing. So your job as a golfer is to go out to the range and figure out what it takes to swing as fast as you can while hitting the ball in the middle of the club face. And you can have some instruction on getting to that place quicker and some shortcuts to that. But learning how you yourself does that, that's why you see a little guy like Justin Thomas hit it a ton.
Yeah.
Jamie Sadlowski, not the biggest guy in the world.
No.
Myself, when I was a long drive competitor, I was under 200 pounds. But the thing that Thomas and Sadlowski and myself, when I was younger, had in common is we went to the range and we didn't care about perfect mechanics. Those kind of worked themselves out coincidentally. But we found out if we did this, we could swing at our fastest and hit the ball in the middle. And that is where most people find their success in hitting it farther.
Well, that's where you get the greatest energy transfer from the club to the ball.
Correct.
Because that's what all this engineering and research and development is put into clubs to do. And
Correct.
a lot of people don't think about that. They think get more swing speed, get more club head speed. And that's all fine and dandy, but if you're not making constant contact on the center of that club face, it's not going to make a bit of difference.
No, I mean, like two quick things here is, it's most things in golf instruction is you find extreme A and extreme B, and you kind of drive right in between them. Extreme A is swing as hard as I can so I can generate more club head speed while you can't hit the ball solid. Extreme B is just swing easy so I can hit the middle of the club face. That's just as bad.
Yeah, okay? I agree.
When I was out, I competed in the senior division in 2013 through 15. And when I went out to practice, I had my flight scope launch monitor out there. And there were ways that I could swing a little bit faster, but the incidence of center face contact was maybe 1 out of 5, more like 1 out of 10. Whereas I could swing way B, where I'd lose like maybe 2 miles an hour, but the ball was going significantly further because I was 4 out of 5 hitting that one solid.
Right.
So, you're looking for the happy medium between just swing easy so I can hit the middle of the club face and swing as hard as I can so I can generate the most club head speed. You're trying to find the middle ground in between those two. And it's a trial and error process. How fast can I swing, and what do I do to do that while still hitting the middle of the face?
Yeah, efficiency of the strike, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Monte, it was an absolute pleasure. This was a great conversation, and there were tons of information that the listeners can gather from this podcast. I'd like to thank you once again, and like we always say before we leave here, do your best until we meet again to keep it in the short grass.
I really appreciate you having me. Thank you.
All right, great. Take care.
You've been listening to Breaking Par with your host, Bernard Sheridan. Follow us on Twitter @BreakingPar and on Facebook @Par Breakers Golf Academy. Until next week, try to keep it on the short grass.